Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Dan Mullen is working wonders down in Gainesville, and he may have his best and most dangerous team going into 2020 as we take a look at Florida's upcoming schedule as the 6th ranked team in our way too early top 25. Dan Mullen really is doing unbelievable things with the Gators. Back-to-back double-digit win seasons, including an 11-2 season last year and a victory in the Orange Bowl over Virginia. And he returned so much talent from that team that we saw last year, including their quarterback Kyle Trask, who really exceeded expectations when he was thrust onto the scene when Felipe Franks went down with an injury. He returns a very solid core of wide receivers and maybe one of the best tight ends in the SEC and even the country in Kyle Pitts. He has really transformed a Florida offense that was struggling under Will Muschamp, that was struggling under Jim McElwain. And in 3 short years, Dan Mullen has quickly turned that around. Defensively, they do lose a handful of starters, more so than they do offensively, but Brenton Cox, the 5-star transfer from Georgia, will now be eligible and will fit very well in Todd Grantham's defense that allowed just 15.5 points per game last year. Good enough for 7th in the entire country. So this Florida team, they are sound offensively and they are sound defensively, and they are looking to dethrone Georgia as kings of the SEC East and maybe even make an appearance in the college football playoff. To do all of that, they first have to get past Eastern Washington. Shouldn't be too much of an issue for Mullen and the Gators. But then they jump right into SEC play, week 2 against Kentucky. And as we all know, the Wildcats are no pushover. They're not anymore, at least. Mark Stoops has quickly transformed this Wildcats program, and it was just 2 years ago that Kentucky came into the swamp and defeated the Gators. Snapped that very, very long losing streak to them. I believe it was up to 31 at that point. They came in and defeated the Gators in their house. Florida got revenge on them last year, defeating Kentucky 29-21, but it came at a price, which was losing their quarterback in Felipe Franks. He got injured in that game. Kyle Trask stepped in, and really the rest is history. He's done a phenomenal job and will be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC this upcoming season. They then play South Alabama in week 3. Once again, shouldn't be too much of an issue there. And then they go on the road to face Tennessee. They really start to hit the bulk of SEC play here. And if you're looking for a key defining stretch in Florida's schedule, it begins here with Tennessee. And it ends here with the road game at Ole Miss. Yes, we know that the game on Halloween against Georgia is the most important game on Florida's schedule. We do know that. It's the most important game, and it will more than likely ultimately decide who wins the SEC East. Who wins the SEC East and goes to the SEC Championship. But that game will not matter if Florida does not get past Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, and Ole Miss, 2 of those being on the road. And while Tennessee and Ole Miss aren't necessarily, up there with Georgia or an Alabama or an LSU or somebody like that, they are going to be dangerous threats on the road. We begin with Tennessee. Florida defeated them 34-3 last year. That was in the midst of that horrible, horrible start for the Volunteers. They're going to be way better this year. We have them ranked 25th in our way too early top 25. We discussed their schedule earlier. And in that video, we said that this could be a potential upset win for the Volunteers. The Gators coming to Knoxville, rivalry game, a Tennessee team that is going to drastically improve on both sides of the ball. With this game being played at Neyland Stadium, with Florida having to replace, in my opinion, more pieces defensively than they are offensively, this game could be scary close in just week 4. And in just week 4, their hopes of winning the SEC East and maybe getting into the playoff could be dashed. FPI has them losing 2 games, and that certainly will not be good enough to reach those goals. That Tennessee game, very, very difficult, one they need to watch out for. Trap game, in my opinion. South Carolina, back at home. Florida defeated the Gamecocks 38-27 last year, and a lot of people thought that would be a trendy upset pick as well. It was played in Columbia at Williams-Brice Stadium a week after South Carolina upset Georgia in Athens. And they thought, all right, if they can beat Georgia, they can beat Florida, especially at home. And Florida kind of ruined that party very, very quickly. But once again, South Carolina, a team that I do think can pull off a handful of upsets, but they'll pull them off in Columbia, not really in the Swamp. LSU, probably the second biggest game on Florida's schedule. First is going to be Georgia. Second is going to be LSU. A very, very difficult game, but an LSU team that loses so much from that team we saw last year. LSU is certainly going to take a step back, but not so far back that they're going to become irrelevant in the SEC West. They could still very well win that division, without a doubt in my mind. But they have to come to the Swamp to get a key conference win, and it's going to be very, very difficult to do so. Joe Burrow is gone. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is gone. Justin Jefferson is gone. Grant Delpit is gone. Christian Fulton is gone. All those names, among all the others, all departing, which means those are holes to fill for LSU. And I don't know if they're going to have all those things worked out in Week 6. I know it's halfway through the season, but those are some bigger shoes to fill than you think. And it's in the Swamp as well. So a huge game for Florida there, one that could very well go in their favor. And then on the road at Ole Miss, once again, towards the bottom of the SEC West for the past few years. But Lane Kiffin's there now. Ole Miss hosts some of the big boys this year. They've got a lot of key games at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium in Oxford. And I think they pull off an upset over one of those teams. Auburn is going to be one of them. Florida is going to be one of them. I don't know who it is that the upset's going to be, but I do think Ole Miss pulls off one of them. And Florida has to be careful that it's not going to be them. We've seen the Gators struggle against Ole Miss before, going all the way back to the Tim Tebow days, and then as recently as I believe 2014, 2015. We've seen it happen before. They cannot allow it to happen again. So this 4-game stretch here, Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, and Ole Miss, on paper might not look that scary, with the exception of LSU. But in reality, it's going to be very, very tough for Florida. And they have to be prepared to take that challenge. They then get the huge bye week before they face off against Georgia in Jacksonville, world's largest outdoor cocktail party, as we all know. And this, of course, is basically going to be the SEC East championship game. The winner of this more than likely will go on to win the division and then face the winner of the SEC West. And the winner of the SEC championship will more than likely go on to play in the college football playoff. And if Florida wants to be that team that maybe gets to the playoff, they got to beat Georgia. A Georgia team that does lose tons of starters on both sides of the ball, but does bring in Jamie Newman, the transfer quarterback from Wake Forest. And Florida lost to Georgia last year 24-17. Some thought that the Gators could dethrone them last year. They just weren't quite there yet. This could be the year they're finally ready to do it. And depending on where you look, a lot of different people out there speculating that this is Florida's year, that they finally will take over Georgia. And that's not Georgia that's the team to beat in the East, but it is in fact Dan Mullen's Gators. It will all be determined on Halloween. Huge, huge game here. Very, very fun one to watch. Two great quarterbacks, Kyle Trask, Jamie Newman. And if you're looking for a team that owns the edge offensively, it probably is going to be Florida in this game. Defensively, it might be Georgia. Something's going to have to give down in Jacksonville. After they get past Georgia, schedule lightens up a little bit. 2 home games, 2 road games, but once again, none of them against some of the more daunting opponents. Really, the schedule, in reality, is not that bad. Tough game against LSU at home. Tough game against Georgia, neutral site like it always is. Kentucky, who's going to be very dangerous this year, at home. Once again, we mentioned that Tennessee and Ole Miss are kind of trap games, sneaky games where they could lose, but they're really not that bad, and those teams could be worse. They could have drawn Alabama out of the West. And they could have drawn Alabama out of the West. Could have been Texas A&M. Could have been or Auburn again. Could have been someone like that. Ole Miss and LSU. Could have been worse when you look at their cross division. At Vanderbilt, Florida beat them 56-0 last year. The game is going to be played in Nashville. I think Vanderbilt will score, but probably not going to be enough to pull off the win, even though just 2 years ago it was a relatively close game. Missouri at home. A lot of new pieces there, including Eli Drinkwitz as the brand new head coach, a guy that I'm not a fan of and a guy that I don't think will succeed during his time with the Tigers. Maybe he proves me wrong, and maybe he has his Tigers in position to make a bowl game at this point in the season. But the game's in the swamp, and there are too many key pieces to replace. Too many key pieces to replace at quarterback, offense as a whole, head coaching position, coaching staff, so much turnover. I don't have a lot of faith in Missouri this year. New Mexico State, certainly don't have faith in them. And then at Florida State, a team that Florida defeated 40-17 last year. Now, of course, like many of the teams on their schedule, and like many of the teams we've discussed, Florida State has a brand new head coach, Mike Norvell, coming over from Memphis. The Seminoles will probably get to a bowl game this year. But will they be a 6-win team, or will they be maybe an 8-win team? Who knows? But he's an offensive mastermind. And with this game being played in Tallahassee, I think Florida State is going to give Florida a much tougher test than they have given them in the past few seasons. So certainly not a game Florida can afford to overlook, especially if they are in the hunt for the college football playoff. By this point, you will know if Florida is going to the SEC championship or not, because this game will not affect them in the SEC standings. But it can very well affect if they can stay in the college football playoff hunt or not. The FPI is projecting the Gators to go 10-2. That's not going to be good enough to get to the playoff. Might not be good enough to get to the SEC championship, but it could be good enough to make a third straight New Year's Six bowl game. Dan Mullen is already 2-0 in those games, winning the Peach Bowl 2 years ago, winning the Orange Bowl last year. For many, that would be a successful season. But with the talent that Florida has and with the way that this schedule lines up, I think for many, it's SEC East champions or bust. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, and subscribe. We really, really appreciate all of your support. And make sure to check out everything down in the description as well for some exclusive college football news, content, and offers that you do not want to miss. And once again, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.